Assalamu alaikum and welcome back to Shaded's Ramadan series, where we're reflecting on the many beautiful lessons and important lessons that we can derive from Surah Yusuf alayhi salam, which leads me to lesson number 7, which says outward appearance versus inward righteousness. The very first introduction we receive of the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam, that they were 10 in number and they were all older than him, as of a boastful nature, where they claimed to be a group of strong men. In and of itself, the phrase means little, but in the context, the brothers are questioning their own father. They're questioning Yaqub alayhi salam, as they believe that he favored and he loved Yusuf alayhi salam much more than he loved them. Because of this sense of entitlement, they seemed to have due to their quantity. So they are comparing themselves because they're numbered and they're older, that it is clear that they have already fallen for one of the plots of Shaitan, as we mentioned earlier. And not only have they begun to disrupt the family unit, as it started to reside hatred in their heart for Yusuf alayhi salam, but they were also convinced that they are greater advantage because of their outward appearance. Now, due to the climax we live in, wherein there is an increasing need of aesthetic perfection, we are in a time that we look at how important people see it to look a certain way and dress a certain way and carry themselves a certain way, because it seems to be extremely important across the world. And now with social media, it just shares that even more, where people want to always compare and contrast with others. But we are inclined to ensuring our outward appearances are the most appealing for the satisfaction of others. It is often the case that we desire for perfection is not for an intention. It is intentional, but our minds are made up already with the thoughts and images that we're exposed to over the time and over with our experiences. So it's inevitable that our minds and our thoughts are kind of creating this what look is right for me and how important it is in that aspect of the eyes of themselves and the eyes of people. And we are, after all, the physical manifestation of our innermost thoughts. So whatever we think and whatever we feel usually comes out in actions. And that's why it's so important for us to even think good, because that will produce good actions. But if we think bad, it will produce bad intentions and bad actions. So though it is a very human thing to be enticed by that which appears greater in value or even worth, we often forget that in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, no human being is better than the other except by the way of righteous deeds. This is how we stand in front of Allah, and this is what either earns us His pleasure or earns us His wrath. He does not pick and choose based off what we look like, what degree we have, what family we're from, how much money we have in our accounts. He looks at our deeds. And in Surah al-Hujarat, we are told that the most noble of you in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the most righteous among you. And this is noteworthy here, is that the word taqwa, which is translated to either fear of Allah or consciousness of Allah, has been used as a descriptor, something that describes good character that's desired of us from Allah, by Allah. That taqwa is not an isolated concept mentioned only in the Quran, but it is also mentioned, as our Prophet Muhammad ﷺ also emphasized the importance of this heightened mindfulness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on several occasions throughout the seerah. The most significant being when he said piety, and he addressed piety while pointing to his finger 3 times, pointing to his chest 3 times, saying that piety is here, piety is here, piety is here, pertaining to the heart. Now it is a befitting reminder that it is the purity of our hearts. It is truly the purity of our hearts that increases His love for us, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not look to our bodies or our faces, but He looks to our hearts. We're all beautiful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, even though we may think that we have certain hiccups or we don't look up to par the way we assume that we do, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you and He created you. So we are all loved by Allah and beautiful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the aspect of our face and our bodies are not to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to judge us, but He looks to our hearts. He looks to our hearts, and that's why having good character and displaying good character is so important. It is not in our numbers or in our beauty that we stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment, but rather in strength of deeds, which will bring us up and raise our ranks. Now, throughout the course of this Quranic chapter in Surah Yusuf a.s., both Yusuf a.s. and Yaqub a.s. demonstrate an incredible amount of sincerity in their trust in Allah. They trusted Allah. Did you notice any time throughout the story did they question Allah? Even Yusuf a.s., when he went from being a boy that was planned and plot against, thrown into a well, taken and sold as a slave, then taken and being treated as a servant in Egypt, then going to be imprisoned wrongfully, did he question Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And the story goes on and on. The same thing with Yaqub a.s. He does not question Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Throughout the many years, he was waiting to see what happened to Yusuf a.s. So understanding this concept of having ikhlas in having tawakkul and trust in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it is as a result of the depth of their taqwa that they are also loved by Him. That this taqwa, this mindfulness, this consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what made them so loved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, neither the beauty of Yusuf a.s. nor the strength in the numbers of the brothers were sufficient alone in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We know that Yusuf a.s. was given half of the beauty of this world, right? So did his beauty affect him or help him in the regard? No. So it's not about beauty, it's not about number of people, so quantity, but rather it is in the state that their hearts are in. It is in the state of their hearts that He measures their worth. We are measured by what's in our heart, and we hope and pray that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala purifies our hearts and makes our hearts of those who constantly love what He loves and work in His favor, and even dislike what He dislikes and refrain from what He prohibits. It is for this very reason that we need to renew our intentions daily and work on our inner selves before we do our external appearances. As we hear that we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as He has beautified our exterior, to beautify our interior. We don't want to only worry about what is on the outside. We have to make sure to nurture and to implement the good aspect internally in order for us to properly obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, submit to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and earn His pleasure. Now, Allah does not look at our bodies, nor does He look to our faces, but He looks to our hearts. So this Ramadan, make sure as we are racing for Allah and the pleasure of Allah, and as we stand and pray to Allah, as we refrain from food and drink for Allah, and we read the beautiful verses in the Quran, as this is the month of the Quran, we need to make sure we absorb those lessons and we allow those beautiful outward actions to beautify our internal beliefs and our internal emotions and our internal feelings. So we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the true guidance and to grant us beautiful and beneficial knowledge, increase us in knowledge, and make us of those that are wise, and make us of those that have the purity of the heart and the purity of the tongue. And He grants us this beautiful blessed gift called taqwa. Please stay tuned and follow Shaded for more of the lessons that are derived from Surah Yusuf. Jazakumullah kun khair, and thank you for your time, and I pray that you have a blessed day.